This class, I won't actually, I'll just pass around the sign-in sheet since we're recording. That way we don't have to go through all of that. And I think we all probably pretty much know each other. So, but we'll introduce ourselves just in case you're not familiar with us. I am Kassie Obelleiro, the Sponsored Programs Trainer. And with me is Alyssa Bunn. So.
That microphone. Alyssa Bunn, proposal team.
She's so quiet.
Right? It's early. It's early.
I know. Here, we can turn this down a little bit. Okay. So we're talking about the proposal budget development, right? And really focusing on using this wonderful template that Alyssa has prepared for all of us. And we'll show you there are several templates, but they're all based on the one we're going to work on with today is the single budget template, template A.
Yes.
And so we're going to dive into that, but the expectation, so one, I do want to point out that this class does not count for any staff development credit. I know there has been some questions about that in the past, and most of our training sessions do not. The only ones that do are the Cayuse related ones because they're very tied in to the actual requirements for the certificate. However, and these proposal ones are really meant to be a supplement, right? They kind of dive deeper into what we're doing. We have a proposal budgeting basics, and then we have this one as well. And we're going to work on one for cost proposal budgets as well, which I'll need help with because I have never done that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll be exciting.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So I just want to point that out. These are not for staff development credit, but they're really meant to just kind of dive in deeper. So in this class, we do assume that you have some of the basics underway because we really just dive into the template. So we don't cover a whole lot of basics. What you should have for your handouts, you should have a copy of today's presentation. I'm sorry, the slides are a little small, but there's really not a whole lot of content on them. It's just if you want to take notes. And then you should have the proposal budget entry exercise. That's what we'll actually use the computers for a little bit later. Alyssa is going to walk you through completing a budget. And then you should also have these little budget formula cards that we've put together and are handing out in our classes now, our budget classes. And these are the common formulas that you'll often need when you are preparing a proposal budget. So it includes how to calculate indirect costs based on the different bases that you use, as well as split rates, which that's, if you have to use multiple rates within one project year or project period, one budget period. And also there's some effort commitment calculations because they can get complicated if you have varying levels of effort during a project period or project year. And also formula for annualizing salary. I do want to point out that all of these formulas can be entered directly into the cell of your Excel spreadsheet.
And we'll talk about how to do that.
Yes, Alyssa's going to demonstrate how to do that. She's going to walk you through it. So that'll be really, really great, I think. Actually, I know. Alyssa's a wealth of knowledge. Okay, so then we also have the outline. So we're gonna just I'm gonna give you a brief overview of the budget template. Then Alyssa's gonna walk you through the budget entry exercise. And we'll talk about what resources are available for later when you're leaving here, in addition to our little handy budget card, formula card. And there's a slide for question and answers, but you can ask as we're going through. Like, feel free to ask questions just as they pop up.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Questions are very helpful, right?
Right. Yeah, they're very helpful. And especially if you ask them when you have them, because that's probably the most relevant time to talk about them. And if it's not, we'll just say we'll talk about that in a moment, right? When we get there.
Correct.
Yeah. So there's no harm in asking it when you think it. Okay. So objectives. What we hope you'll get out of this morning is that you'll know what the budget templates are and where to find them. I think all of you probably already know that. So we've probably accomplished that already. Also that you'll know how to build formulas within Excel. So we alluded to that a moment ago, but especially when you're trying to calculate effort and salary, those are the two places where it comes in probably the most handy. So there's other examples, but those are really the most often place that we do that. And then also that you'll know how to enter subawards accurately into that template based on, and it's going to differ if it's an NIH proposal or not an NIH proposal, right? That's really when we see that difference. that you'll also know how to enter single IRB fees. So if you have any human subjects, then you have to have IRB fees associated with that. You'll know how to enter those. And that you'll understand how to select and adjust the FNA rate and basis in the template, because you can actually do that within the template. And it's really neat. And it has options. So if you're not using one of our federally negotiated rates, say you're applying to a private foundation and they're only going to accept 10% or 0%, because that can happen, you can use this template to calculate that for you as well.
Exactly. You don't have to override the formulas.
Exactly. You should never override the formulas.
That's right.
Right. That's something that we hope you learned today for sure. Okay, this is where you can find them. I'm just going to give you a brief overview and then we're going to dive right in. So you find them on our website at this link. You log in with your Kerberos. It does require you to log in. And you'll see this list here. So we have the various templates that you can choose from. You can see we've got a single budget template, which we'll work with today. And then there's another template that you can use if you need to indicate cost sharing within your budget, and a multi-budget. So if you have a multi-component.
Sometimes people use them for task budgets as well.
Task budget. Yep. So you have that option there. And then AB20. So if you are applying to a California state agency using the California Model Agreement, then there is a budget for that.
Correct.
And also there is a CIRM budget if you are applying to CIRM, the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Yay! Okay. So these are really, really helpful templates, and you can see the date that they were updated. This I think is old because actually Alyssa's updated them since those dates over there.
Maybe February, the end of February.
Was it? I thought it was March. Anyways, you'll see the date over here for the most recent version.
And we also make custom spreadsheets.
Yes.
On demand. So if you email me and you say I have this weird thing, I need 8 periods, for instance, produce that for you. Sometimes we just have ones. I know we have a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which has a really unique indirect cost base that says once you reach a certain amount of services, then it goes from 4% to 8%. And so it does that for you. So we've done that before. Or sometimes cost proposals have odd periods. Like you have to go 6 months, 12 months, 12 months, 6 months, 12 months. And then that can take some customization.
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to Alyssa if you're in one of these unique situations and the budget template doesn't quite work the way that any of them are formulated. And then also she's put together these budget sheet FAQs, which is a really, really great document that walks you through using the budget template. I think you even have example calculations, formulas, and such. So it's a really, really great resource. If you feel confused when you're using that template, I would encourage you to pull up the FAQs. I think there's even screenshots and pictures. So
there are.
It's a great tool. I think I use it a lot to like update our training materials. So I think it's a really, really good tool. All right, so features of the template, right? The templates all include the current rates, FNA rates, and fringe benefit rates. She recently updated them to be the composite benefit rates for UC Path.
Correct.
Right? And those, my understanding is those are the rates we should be using. You can also escalate or not escalate. So if you need to escalate salaries or fringe benefits, for example, you can do that. You can escalate them all at the same rate or varying rates, or only escalate some.
Some at the fiscal year, or you can choose project year only, right?
Yeah, and that's
we'll show you that.
Yeah, because people I think miss that. They don't always see that little option. So you can choose to escalate by by fiscal year, or by project year. And we don't mean project like 12 months, right? The project that's
each period, right?
Budget period. Yeah, because if we say project period, then you think like the overall project. So, okay. And then also there's an FNA details tab, and that tab will give you the details of the FNA rates used, the indirect base, so the amount that it was applied to, and cost by budget period. Right. So it's a really, really great feature. And there's a personnel reference tab that will calculate certain pieces of information that you need to complete agency forms, such as person months. Right. Is there another one you'd call out there? Person months is what I see.
I think the one thing that it's really helpful, I know when I'm entering budgets, is that if you're using, let's say, fiscal year escalation, and you just have your amounts of salary, and you have to enter what's your base for each year, it tells you. Perfect. So, you're escalating and you want to know what that base salary is.
Yeah.
So those types of information, not everyone sees it, but it's on that tab, and we'll look at that.
Yeah, she'll show you that because it's really great. It saves you so much time. To me, that's one of the big things about this template is it saves you a lot of time. It also aids in the sponsored programs review because we're familiar with this template. We're very familiar with it. So it's easy for us to identify things that maybe don't appear correct.
Right.
We can identify where that's coming from, right? So it's really great for that. Okay, so there are some do's and don'ts in using the templates, right? So first of all, you always want to use the current version. So we don't recommend that you save the template, like a blank template to your desktop and just reuse it because often updates are made. For example, Alyssa just updated the benefit rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't get the most recent one, you're not going to have that. There could be other updates as well.
Right. There could be some error that's discovered based on some weird date. Like once in a while, if you go like 6/28 to 7/14, there could be a rounding that maybe changed in escalation, and I might fix a formula to compensate for that. Because it's hard to test every date combination, right?
Right. So you can't always predict like, oh, we have new rates. So she just updated the template.
Yeah, exactly. And so those things might not be.
Right. So we encourage you just go to the website and download it each time you're going to use it. That is the safest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to hide, you can hide and unhide lines. I often hide lines to make the budget fit on one page, but you never want to delete lines because it will mess up the formulas that are calculating. So don't delete lines. Additionally, if you need additional lines, you can unhide them, and Alyssa will show you where you can see that there are extra rows.
Right.
If you need additional rows, you can email Alyssa and she will add them for you so that the formulas will calculate correctly.
Right. Because I had one department that needed 80 personnel lines. And I don't normally put 80 because it's not usual. Right. And so each of those, in order to have our escalation formulas, we have to have information for each of those lines. So you can't just add them. You need to back end add formulas.
Exactly.
So that's something I can do for you.
Yeah. So don't delete or add lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then additionally, don't write over or delete formulas, right? So in any of the fields that have formulas already built into them, don't hard enter, don't type over those. Because
and if you think it doesn't work for what you want to do, then maybe give me an email and I might be able to tell you a choice that you need to make or some other way to accommodate what you're trying to accomplish.
Right, exactly. Maybe you can modify it if needed.
Right.
Okay. Also, you want to you always want to check the calculations. So I always call it a sanity check, right? Like look over there in that area and make sure it looks right. Because if it doesn't, then you can check the formulas, you can check what you entered and see, not her formulas are kind of hard to check, but yeah, don't try that, but you can check your own, right? Like if you're going to use one of these formulas we're going to talk about today. Also, if you're going to copy and paste into the spreadsheet, make sure you do it in values only or plain text mode. You don't want to copy formulas from one cell to another.
Right. Like if you were copying effort and you wanted to go from one spreadsheet to another and you just copy and paste, you're going to link it back to that other spreadsheet and then none of your formulas are going to work properly.
Right. So just copy and paste, plain text or values only. Don't copy. Yep. So that's what we just said. And that's it. Right. So those are really the do's and don'ts.
And also don't copy tabs.
Yes.
If you want additional tabs and you're looking at your request and you're like, I want to, you need to use the multi-template because there's back-end things. So if you just copy it, it's not going to work properly.
Right. And if you ever look at the formulas, you'll understand how complicated the formulas are, right? I think you said you looked at them too. So I've tried to check. If I really am just not sure and I want to check it for myself, I just create the formula like over in an empty cell somewhere and just make sure it's coming up with the same thing. I have done that because I think maybe it's my formula, like the way I entered it isn't right. And so I kind of back end it that way to check it.
And you can always ask me. You can always email and say,
you can.
This doesn't look right to me. What's going on with it?
You can.
It's important.
I am awful about asking for help. I will like work on it for about an hour before I go ask Alyssa. Say, what's wrong with it?
That's reasonable.
Okay, an hour's okay.
I still mean suffer for a week.
Yeah, I know. She convinced me to get help on a forum the other day, and I'm so glad I did because it's so much better. Anyways, it's good to ask for help.
Collaboration and teamwork.
It is. It's good. And he's going to teach me. Anyways, good. Okay. So does anybody have questions about the template before we actually just get into it and start using it? All right, so go ahead and go to this link here. It's the docs.or.ucdavis.edu/SPO. You'll log in with your Kerberos and then download template A. And what you'll need are the budget entry exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to use this one, will you?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I guess so.
It might be easier.
Two hands down.
Yeah. If it's locked, there's a password right there. It's on the little sticker.
Okay, great. Okay, so when you download this, it's good to save as on your desktop instead of just, you don't want to fill it in right from your screen, right when you download it, you want to save it and reopen it so that you're not in a temporary instance, right? And save it on the desktop. All right, so does everybody have their?
I'll write it larger on the board. So it's
Mm-hmm. Single budget. Mm-hmm. If you also Google UC Davis SPO OR budget templates, it should come up as a choice.
I just redid the website. So
that's what I usually do.
I'm going to Google it now.
All right. Thank you. The Google. You're going to use the Google?
It's a great resource.
All right. Let me know if you guys are, when everybody's ready. Looks like Elvia doesn't have internet. Is that right? Is it on the Wi-Fi?
But it's weird.
Hey, Odie. Hey. Well, while we're waiting for that, I'm going to start to talk about the top here. So
everyone will need your little budget entry or the budget entry exercise.
So we're going to simulate entering an NIH proposal for Dr. Jeffries from chemistry. And in our scenario, he's asked us to draft a 3-year budget for a proposal whose submission deadline is January 1, 2019. And he's provided us with the following preliminary information. So the project start date's going to be January 1, 2020. We have our randomized cookie eating trial as the title, and the sponsor is NIH. So the first thing we want to do is go right up here to this proposal due date. This is important because this is where all your fiscal year escalations start from this date onward. So we want to be sure we enter something in there. And he says that the deadline's January 1, 2019. So I'm going to put that in to start with. The first thing I always do. If you don't have a definite due date, you can just approximate. Then we want to look at our start date. Our start date is listed as January 1, 2020. So that's the next thing you always want to be careful of because all of your rates are based on these dates. And then it's a 3-year budget. So we're going to go 12/31/22. And you'll notice it says 36 months here. So we've got the right amount. So that's the first thing you always want to enter, the due date or your approximate due date, and then your period of performance, because all your rates are going to be based on that. Yeah, it's because probably your start date is after your is before your due date, so you have to do your start date first. So the thing is, because your due date should always be before your start date, so I built in a safe fail for that, because if not, your escalations start on your due date and it's after your start date, and that doesn't work well, right? So if you get that error, that's why. All right, so you should see then all 3 of your project period dates right here. So you want to check those and make sure it looks right and that your total is 36. I know sometimes what I do is I put 12/31/2023 because I'm thinking 3 years, even though since it ends in December, it should be 22, right? Okay, I'll come help you. Let me help you. Okay, so does not match the validation restrictions. Okay, 1/120, and it won't let you do 1/119.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You want me to type yours in too? I don't know. Maybe you were typing just 1 instead of 0, 1.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
You know, that stuff reminds me of like when I have IT issues and then IT comes over and it works.
yeah.
I don't know if that,
figured.
I don't know if that's true, but probably you need 2 digits for the month. Sure. The other thing I want to tell you, if your computer's set on European dates, some of our professors have European dates where it goes day, month, year. This will all just say value, because in Excel, there's no current fix for that. So you have to be in the same region as your date formulas. So you can either provide it to them in PDF or they need to change their region to month, day, year. Just a fun fact. Nobody's gotten upset about that or anything. Okay. I usually put the title right up here. So we're going to put randomized cookie eating trial. And then the PI's name here. Well, it doesn't matter. It's internal. You can use that for whatever you want. But the intention is if you have a whole bunch of projects, you can easily tell what it is, which one this one is. So it doesn't have to be the actual title. It can be your abbreviated title, like Joe's spaghetti proposal. It doesn't matter. Whatever, it's supposed to just be identifying for you. So if you open it, you know which project it is. So if you always just put his actual title, you wouldn't be able to distinguish this maybe from some other one, but maybe you just use the Excel title. So up to you. No right or wrong answer. Okay. So does everybody's proposal have it all set up there? Okay. The next thing you do is we want to decide if it's NIH or not. If it's an NIH, some of our calculations are a little bit different for our subawards. If you don't have subawards, it doesn't really matter if you change this, but if you do have subawards, you're going to want to change this to NIH. So we're just going to do that so I can show you what the differences are. And we won't see that until later on, but just important to do up at the top. All right. The other thing I wanted to point out here, this next thing I usually decide is about escalations. So right now this is escalation fiscal year, and that's because we normally get raises July 1. So when we do our normal budgeting, we want to say there's a raise every July 1, right? That doesn't necessarily correspond to our project period. You'll notice our period starts in January. So what this spreadsheet does is if you're choosing fiscal year escalations, it starts here on 1/1/19, and it takes whatever you put as your salary, and every July 1 after that, it's going to escalate whatever you've said. So that means, according to this budget, July 1, 2019, which is before your start date, it's going to start with an escalation. Then the next July 1 is going to have an escalation. So your escalations are going to be split 6 months at one rate, 6 months at the next escalation rate all the way through, and there's going to be a pre-escalation. So you'll notice if I put 100,000 here, for example, and then I put 10% here, normally that would be 10,000. You have much more than 10,000, right? Because you've included a pre-escalation. And I can see that by if I went, like we said, to personal reference, we're actually starting out at 104 and then going 107 and then 110. We'll get more into that, but I just wanted to point that out. Let's say you don't want to do that. You just want a straight 10,000 in year 1 and then 3% in year 2 and then 3% more, right, in year 3. Then you're going to want to change this to PY. And then you'll see that leaves it static. So it's this, a straight calculation times this, and then year 2 you went up your 3%, right? And then next year you would have gone up another 3%. So you can choose how to do it. A lot of people use this fiscal year because it's more accurate. You're probably going to have some escalations before this even starts if it doesn't start till 1/1/20. But maybe you want to build those in right here. Maybe you just want to start high and then do a straightforward calculation. So you have that choice. Right now, I also wanted to point out this is on multi-escalations. So that means each person can be escalated at a different rate. You have all these choices here. It can even be 0. Maybe somebody's already at the NIH cap and you don't want that one person to be escalated, but you want everybody else to be escalated. So you can choose it by person. What if you know you're doing NSF and you just want everybody at 3%? Then instead of putting multi, you can just pick 3%. This is going to disappear and everybody's just going to be at 3 and you don't have to think about it. So you have those choices. I leave it on multi because I think sometimes people want to do faculty at one rate and then their grad students at another, to be named. So this gives you the most choice. But you can go all the way up to 8%. We don't recommend that. Our standard is 3. But people have asked me for more. And perhaps somebody's getting a special promotion and you just want those to be higher. You might do 5. Fun fact, NIH actually won't pay escalations and they're getting really serious about this lately. So they want you to put 0. So if that's the case, you can just go here and put everybody at 0. They'll let you propose them at time of proposal, but then they'll cut them and they won't let you rebudget them. So when people say, I need to put them in there, how am I going to pay them? Well, now you're going to end up with less money and still have to pay them. So if you had like a $500,000 limit, it doesn't benefit you to put in escalations, have them cut and then still have to pay them and end up with 430, right? So yes, if you're already at the limit. If there's absolutely no limit, it doesn't hurt, but you're not going to get them. So we recommend putting that funding in a different category that still benefits the project, but knowing you'll have to rebudget for actual. And they've set that up to not be very good for our internal projections, right? They just say they won't pay projections. So, but in this case, we're going to pretend that they do, I think. All right, so I just wanted to set that up. That's how the escalations up here worked, and you do have some choices. All right, so we're going to start by entering Professor Jeffries. And the first thing we usually do when we're thinking about a proposal budget is enter people, right? Because people are really the most important part of our budget, and how much they're going to work, because we can't get the work done without people. So one of the most important things is how much effort the PI is going to commit. And he says he'll commit 20% effort during all 3 project years. In addition to the 20% effort, he'll also work 1 month during the summer in the first year. So he wants 20% annual effort, just in general, and then 1 additional month to work in the summer in year 1.
So here's another thing that's important to know about academic salary is that at the university, when we talk about percent efforts, we're talking about an entire 12-month pie. We always annualize effort. So when we say 10% effort, that means out of 12 months. And that's how our accounting system works. It doesn't matter when the professor takes that in the summer or not. They're just committing to 10% sometime during the year. Therefore, we always want to annualize salary. So if somebody's making a 9-month salary, right? We want to say, what do they make over 12 months? Because when we say 10% effort, we're going to assume that they can work up to 12 months so that we have enough funding for the project. And that's how accounting wants us to do that. And so we used to just do that right here in the base. We would say if somebody had 9 months, we would say, what is that over 12 months? We'd take their 9-month salary and then we'd add 3 and we put it right here in the base column. But then professors came back and they were like, I don't make that much money. What are you doing? You can't budget anything. True story. And so we created a second column so that they can see the difference. So they can see this is their base salary and this is your total potential, what you would charge during the summer. So this has caused some confusion because sometimes people feel like they should put all the summer salary here and nothing in the base column. You always want the base salary and you always want to put your total possible summer salary. So let's start. It's your 9-month if you had a 9/12 faculty. And then this would be like 3/9 of salary, right? Your total possible over 12 months. Now, if you're a faculty member, you know there's no possible way that they're ever going to have any summer. The 9 months is their 12 months of salary, right? But most of our faculty, we don't know what grants are going to come in. We don't know what their possibility is. We want to say, if they do 10% effort, what's the most that's going to cost us? Right. Yep. If they're a 12/12 faculty, their base is their 12/12, right? If they're in vet med or they have another appointment, if they're 11/12, this is their 11, and this would only be 1 month. Correct. Correct. Because that's really how they're paid when they spread it out. It's not the period they're paid for. So what's their total? We want this total column to end up their total possible compensation. Okay. So first thing I do is enter the person's name here. So we're going to enter the PI first. Professor Jeffries, right? And then you can also put their I can't see if I spelled that right, but also put their title. This is helpful. You can put postdoc after here. You can put project scientist, abbreviated any way you want. It kind of gives the role. When a professor or faculty member has both summer and academic, you want to use 2 lines. And you want to do that because our benefit rates are different during the summer and the academic year. So I usually put a notation here just to remind me, even though I'll show you there's another column over here where we have a notation. It's just my habit. So you want to do that. Now we want to look and see what his 9-month salary is. And does anybody know what you would put here in the base salary? When we say annual salary, we mean over 9 months, right, Kassie? You have on your thing annual salary for 131? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So his base salary is 131, right? So I'm going to put that here. And I'm going to put that in both of these cases because we're going to put the entire salary on both these. Now, Professor Jeffries has a 9-month academic year appointment. So we want to annualize Professor Jeffries' salary in this case, right? Professor Jeffries can work up to 3 months. We don't know what grants he's going to get, but we're going to assume we want a budget for the max, right? That he could possibly get when we talk about effort. So we're going to put 3 months of summer in here because that's the max when you have 9. So you can do this a really easy way. Anybody have ideas? Okay, yep. So we're going to put equals. I just do it right here. Now you can round too, but I don't usually bother to do that. Equals, and then you can just click on here. We're going to divide by 9 to get 1 month, right? And then we're going to times by 12. That's going to give us 12/9, right? Total in this total column. Whoops, what did I do? Sorry, times 3. I'm just keeping you on your toes. And now you have cents here, so you can just do this and not look at them. So did you see that there's this little decimal place? So if you want to see more or fewer decimals, you can also round things. You can put this formula right here equals round and then put parentheses and then put a 0 and say that means 0 decimal places. Just to let you know. Do what I usually do. Yeah. When you want to round something, you put round and then you put a parentheses around the formula, right? And right before you close the parentheses, you put comma and then how many decimals you want it to round to. In this case, it's 0. So I find that handy whenever you're doing any kind of budgets, because we don't deal with cents in our budgets if they don't make sense. Yeah, you can do that too, but then the decimal's still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't know that.
And then if you wanted to round up, you would write round up here. And if you wanted to round down, you would type round down, one word. So. Yep. Okay. And then when we're going to our next line, we can just drag this down like this. So you don't have to do it twice. And you'll notice then the formula is in both places. So you go until there's a little plus, and then you can drag. So I said this, right? Equals, and then I clicked on, yeah, divide by 9, because that gives you 1 month. When you divide a 9-month salary by, you get 1 month, and then we're going to times it by 3 to get 3 months. So then this is 9 months and 3 months, and this is 12-month annualized salary. So we used to do this all in this square, and that's what my original formula is. We'd say equals base salary divided by 9 times 12, but then again, it shows 174, and people were confused. So it caused some concern. So this is really clear, and if you had to send this to a foundation or a sponsor, they can see what you're doing, right? All right. So this is our total amount if we have a 12-month pie. And I always like to think of this as, if we didn't put this in here, and we just did 10% effort, and we just had 131, that would be 10% of 9 months, but it doesn't tell you what your overall effort was, right? And so it's important to say, what is 10% of my annual, everything I can do equal? And we like to think of it as this way. If you think about, if you had 3 quarters, right? That's 75%. It's 100% of 3 quarters, but it's 75% of $1, right? I can think about it in your percentages. All right. So does everybody have that? Okay. So Professor Jeffries in all years said 20% annual effort. So we can just put in 20%. And you see, you can just drag this amount by getting that plus sign and just dragging it over. And then, so that's academic year. And this is a little, this is a reference tab. It helps us with our personal. So I'm going to say AY 9/12. So Professor Jeffries has a 9/12 appointment, and this is academic year time. Then we're going to go to summer, and Professor Jeffries says he wants 1 month in year 1. So right here in the effort, we can put in a formula. We can say equals, and I'm going to say 1/12. I'm going to say 1/12 because, of course, when we do summer salary, we want 1/9 of their base salary, but we have 12 ninths, right? Right here in the 174 is 12 ninths, right? So when we say 1/12, it actually equals 1/9 of 131, and I'll show you why this works. So this is an annual 1 month of effort is 1/12, that's 8%, right? If we had just put it in as 131, somebody's base salary, we would have to put equals 1/9 here, right? Because we want 1/9 of salary. Now you notice these are exactly the same amount of money, right? So it's 11% of a 9-month salary, but it's not 11% effort. So if you went into the effort reporting system and you said 11% effort, and then that professor had summer salary, then you're actually committing more than you're charging the sponsor, right? Because it's not 11% of their entire effort. Does that make sense? It's really 8% of the year. And that's why we use these two numbers here instead of just doing 131 and 1/9. Again, same amount of money. It's just a different percentage of your overall pie, your overall ability to work. Now, if you had a professor that never took summer salary, they weren't allowed, they went to the Bahamas, they don't do research, which is not likely, they were never going to get summer, then this 11%, this 1 month, could actually be 11% of their total pie, right? Because that's all they do. But that's not likely. We don't plan that way, right? Because we want our best estimate. Does that make sense? How about you, Wendy? Does that make sense? No, this 11% is this amount of money that you're charging for 1 month is 11% of their base salary, but it's not 11% of 12 months of work. So your annual effort should always be based on what you do in a full year, because we annualize effort. It's 1/9 of 131, right? Because when we do summer salary, they can have 1/9. Right? Just in virtue of the fact that this is summer salary means that they have more than their base salary, so it's inaccurate effort 11, right? So this is correct. It's 1/12 because this is 12/9. Amount of money. Okay, so I'm going to mark this as summer salary. I'm going to say 9/12 summer. I'm going to erase this. Do you need me to do any other examples with that, or is that pretty clear? Well, the amount of money you charged would have been correct, but that wouldn't have been their annual effort. It would just their percent of base salary. Yeah. Then it's pretty easy. You would still do 1/12. Like, let's say they were in somebody's 12/12 and they make 150,000. You would just put it in their base because they don't have any summer. And then you would put your equals 1/12, right? Because you were charging a month, and it's still 8. Yeah, but then it's accurate. It's really easy when somebody's 12/12 because there's none of that annualizing, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so then we have Dr. Jeffries entered, right? We have all the effort he wants to commit. And so we're going to go down here, and you can either put all salaries in and then do benefits, or you can do it a little bit at a time. We have our benefits, and we're going to go down to summer, and I'm going to pick faculty summer. Well, first line is academic year, so I'm going to pick academic. And then I'm going to go down to faculty summer and pick faculty summer A. And you'll notice there's summer A, B, and C. And what this does is, based on your project dates, where does the summer fall? Some faculty might, I'm just taking summer in July and August. If you'll notice, that's in a whole different fiscal year than if you took some 2 weeks in June, because summer technically goes from 6/15 to 9/15. So if I pick A, you're going to have 2 weeks in one fiscal year, and then you would have another 2 weeks in the next fiscal year. So this would calculate 2 weeks at 10.2 and 2 weeks at 10.5. If I knew my faculty member wasn't going to take it, or I just wanted to budget the highest amount because I don't know when they're taking it, I could pick B, and you'll notice the whole thing is at the next rate because it's going to assume it's after that fiscal change. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter which one you pick, but they're different rates. And if you hover over here, you can see what the dates are. Faculty summer A assumes 6/15 to 9/15, B is 7/15 to 9/15, and C is just between July and August. And again, depending on where your project dates are, it can affect just slightly your benefit rates. It really doesn't make a big difference usually, right? A couple $100. So in this scenario, I'm going to pick A. And then I'm going to go up here and add the next person. So we have Amy Admin, a project scientist, is going to commit 20% effort on the project during all 3 years. Her salary is $50,000. So this is similar to a 12-month faculty, a little bit more straightforward. I'll give you a chance to enter. I'm slowly start typing in and then you can. All right. Did everybody get that one entered? And have these numbers? Anybody not have these numbers? Okay. So in the next one is a little bit different as far as effort goes. So let's put our postdoc in. So we have our postdoc, and annual salary is too low for our postdoc, but poor postdoc. But maybe he has a fellowship or something as well. We'll just assume so. Yeah. All right. So then we would put that in the base salary, right? Our postdocs are paid 12 over 12, so we don't need any kind of summer in there. And this one I'm going to help you with a little bit. So this person is going to commit 50% effort for only 6 months in the first project year. So what we want to do is we want to go right here to our effort formula. We're going to put in equals in here and then some parentheses. And we're going to say 0.5. You can also write in 50%, but I like to use decimals. So 0.5 times 6, right? Those are the number of months. Somebody's going to work half of 6 months, right? And then I'm going to divide by 12. All right. So I'm going to leave that up there. So basically, you're going to take your percentages, and this is on our little sheet as well, right? Our formula sheet. Whatever percentage there, and you're going to times it by the number of months in that project period, and then divide it by the number of months in that project period. You could do that too if you did it in your head, but sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated, and that's why we're using this simplified. Like our grad student's going to work 47% for 3 months plus 50% for 3 months plus 100% in the summer. Sometimes you might want to do that in a formula. You could certainly do it by hand and just put it in there. Yeah. Is just one option.
I like doing it by formula because it's easier to identify.
Plus,
At it if I did something wrong.
also, then if you hover over it, you know exactly what you're charging. Like you're writing your budget justification, you can say, oh, okay, this person's going to work 50% for 6 months. Whereas somebody might say, why is that 25% or 14.8? Like, where did you come up with that? Yeah. Yeah. This gives you a little bit more context. And then we've left these at 12 over 12 because that's appropriate for the appointment. Does anyone have questions on entering those? I'm going to go down here to our benefits then. Our project science is an academic appointment, so it falls under this faculty academic. And then our postdoc has their own rates, which have gone up with the UC path quite a bit, actually. And you'll notice that this is splitting all the rates. So since our rates are developed by fiscal year, you'll see this amount right here, this 6/6 tells you that 6 months are at the first rate and 6 months are at the next. If you had a different project period, right, you might have 10 and 2, you might have 11 and 1, so you're going to know exactly how much is being charged at each rate. All right. So now we have a GSR 3. So we have a lot of GSRs here. We want to put GSR 3, right? And this is non-resident. So sometimes I just like to make a note to myself so I know how to charge the benefits down below. You don't have to do that. You can put somebody's name. You can denote this however you want to. And you'll notice all of these, when you enter somebody up here, they're copied down here, so you don't have to re-enter them twice. And current annual salary is $39,906, right? So I'm going to put that in here. Now for GSRs, they're really paid 12/12. I know people talk about academic year versus summer, but we're going to take care of that in effort. We're not going to split that between base and annual salary because they really aren't paid that way. If you wanted to have a different line for academic year and summer, you could, of course. I usually don't do that because I'm going to do all my effort in the formula, but that's really up to you. You could have 2 lines. So this is their annual salary, what is listed in payroll. And then we're going to go over to the formula and we're going to do something similar to what we did with the postdoc. So 3 months during each of 3 project years at 25%. So does anybody know how we would enter that? Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you can just take this and drag it over, right? Sometimes you might have somebody's going to work 25% for 3 months, let's say in the summer, plus 47% for 9 months, let's say, right? So you can just put a plus right here and then do another parentheses, right? And then say 9 times 0.5, let's say 50% during the academic year, right? Divide by 12. And so you'll see you have, here's your summer effort, and that might even be 100%. You might just have 3, right? And then you're going to have your 50% for 9 months. I like to divide them so I can see them. You could have the whole thing and then divide it all by 12, but. And then you'll get a formula. So you can add different amounts. So if somebody said my postdoc's going to work 50% for 6 months and then 100% for 6 months, you could do that this way, right? You can just keep adding different appointments.
And Alyssa, repeat, you can just do it divide by 12.
You could, yeah. You could do 0.25 times 3 plus 0.5 times 9 and divide the whole thing by 12.
We just like to do it the other way.
So I can see it really easily. And
That's how we
then,
want to mention it. You know, my sister is a high school math teacher, and she always says, as long as you get the right answer,
right,
it's okay. There's a lot of ways to get there.
right. And then you pick grad and undergrad rate, right? And you'll notice it's really small because it's only 1.9%. And our costing and policy escalates benefits by 3% each year. So they have what they think for 1 or 2 years estimated, and then they ask us to escalate. Again, with NIH, they won't pay those escalations. So there's this choice right here, escalations to fringe. Sometimes DOE won't either. Then we change that to no. And what this is the most current approved rate for this fiscal year, and it leaves it solid. So it's not that it takes a projection and leaves it solid. Some people say, well, let's just take year 1 split and then not escalate after that. But when NIH or DOE comes back, they want to see our agreement and they want these to match. That's why it goes back to whatever our current agreement is. So even though this starts in 2020, this will be our current year's rates if they don't allow escalations. And again, you can toggle between yes and no. Did everybody get these?
I think that's only if everyone is at the max. Their salaries way under NIH rate.
No, NIH just won't pay escalations, period. Their philosophy is, and if you normally do modular, it's not an issue, right? Because you're just asking for it and you can certainly include them. But if they're looking at your budget and you have any projections, they just cut them. And that is because they want to pay actuals. They don't want to pay everyone's projections and then run out of money. So their whole philosophy is, I want to pay what the costs are now because you have no idea what they will be. The problem with that is you have to pay us, right? Things go up. Yeah. So if you have a budget limit, it just doesn't make sense to include them in here. because you're going to get the same amount of money no matter how you present it to them. So it's better to present without that. No, you just leave it whatever our actuals are because that's what they want confirmation of. You don't get them. So what you would have to do is, let's say your budget limit's $500,000, right? So you're going to get $500,000 no matter how you present that budget to them. So you would have to put that in a different category that's not escalated. Let's say supplies, something that you could use to benefit the project. So you don't want to pad your budget, but you want to say, wow, the budget would really benefit from these costs, but perhaps this is somewhere I could rebudget if I had to pay for somebody's increase, right? They'll allow you to rebudget for them.
But it's not escalation at that point, right?
Right. It's actuals.
So they'll allow you to rebudget if you're not at the limit
Mm-hmm.
when you know the actual amount, so when it's no longer an escalation.
Yeah, so you're going to get 500,000, but if you included them in your budget and that 500,000 included your escalations, they just cut them and you end up with 470, and then you have to pay the escalations. And that's not good.
But if you have that amount somewhere else that you can budget.
Right.
Well, have you ever done like, say, for example, the summer salary, and if you budgeted for that summer salary, regardless if they go up every year or not, this is what's the budget, that's over it.
No, I would rebudget for it. I mean, that's at your discretion, but if you've committed to a certain level of effort, then you're going to want to pay that effort even if those amounts have gone up. But that's really like a post-award issue. They're only going to give you the amount you
I just
is
had
current.
one guy that didn't want to go beyond, because originally, the one guy that was working on the project,
Mhm.
we were supposed to hire,
Mhm.
and he just went way beyond summer salary, what was budgeted,
Mhm.
and did it for like 2 years. And it's just like over, sure, like $3,000 or $4,000.
Because his salary went up or because he wanted more time. Yeah.
That much, and, we want 3%, like, just way beyond, and it's like cutting into the other.
Sure. That can happen.
Do the research, so it's like, no, you can't go over this.
Yeah, that's a post-award decision. It's not really our pre-award budgeting, just, yeah. All right. All right, so we've decided that we're gonna escalate our fiscal year at 3% in this budget. So we have fiscal year here and we have 3%. So we can do it right there, right? If we had anybody at the NIH cap, we wouldn't want to do that in. What we would want to do is go over here to personal reference. I'm just gonna stop by here for a minute. And you'll notice this is much lower than the 174 because this is our base salary. So if we wanted to see, this is actually because we're charging on academic and summer. And when we go into grants.gov forms or Cayuse 424 forms, right? We're gonna say 2.4 academic year and 1 summer month. And we're gonna have 2 rates, right? We're gonna put in our academic year salary and we're gonna put in our summer year salary. I don't know if you've ever seen the federal forms, but there's a space that says what's the academic year salary and what's the summer salary. So these are the amounts you entered. And here are the person months that you would enter. But let's say you want to know for NIH if you've exceeded the cap, you actually can hover over these 2 right here. And you'll notice, well, we can't see it because this is in the way. But right down here, it'll tell you how much that equals. Oh, here it is, 193,726. Do you see right down here? So fun thing in Excel, if you highlight cells, you can see what the totals are right here. I find that useful. So I could tell right here that I've exceeded the cap. It's 193,726. What some people do if they are including escalations, again, for the NIH, mostly we wouldn't include them. In this case, somebody might start at the cap because it's super close and it's 2020, so they might do that. They might use 2 lines and go all the way up to the second year if you didn't exceed it, and then have another line that's just at the cap and put the 27% there. So you might have 3 lines for this professor or 4, right? So that you can escalate all the way up and then stop at the cap. So those are some options. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Now, if you don't choose the correct things here, then your person months are not going to be correct, because if I went over here and I said this person was paid on a 12-month basis, or I didn't change this, and you went over to personal reference, it's going to calculate in calendar months when you're doing academic, which would be fine if you were using calendar, you'll notice, but then your base is your total 12-month salary, right? So maybe you're doing NIH and you just want to do it on a calendar month basis. You could do that and then choose calendar, and then you can see right away you've exceeded the cap there, right? That's another way to do that. So this doesn't change these calculations, but it does change how your salary and your person month looks for the forms. Okay. All right, so then we have these benefit rates, and costing and policy has a by title code spreadsheet that you can look up somebody's title code, and it'll tell you which one to use. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Most of all your C faculty and academic fall into this faculty and academic. All of their staff is basically your D rate that used to be, right? All your SRAs, your lab staff, your analysts, you have postdocs, grad students, and then faculty summer. And then up here, all your H comp are now combined, your A and B are combined into one. So.
What did you say that?
On Costing and Policy's website, if you Google Costing and Policy Composite Benefit Rates UC Davis, it'll come up. And there's this little UC Path purple square that's easy to miss right up in the corner, and you click on that, and Mike LeGrand has the new spreadsheet up there. And there's multiple tabs, so there's a summary tab and then by title code. All right. So now we're going to go to subawards. So we have by the way, we have equipment right here. We're not going to have equipment on our grant, but if you put anything here in the equipment that's excluded, that's things $5,000 or more, right? Useful life of over a year. Those things are going to be excluded from your indirect costs if we're using our usual rates. So that's why it's important to put equipment here. We would put travel here. You can put lots of details for travel. Again, there's additional lines here. Maybe you're buying a lot of equipment, right? You can unhide. Let's say you have no equipment whatsoever and you just don't want to look at that. You can highlight this and hide that section. You can tell when things are hidden by, there's a gap. See how it goes 62 to 75? So you know there's things hidden there. So in order to unhide again, you would highlight before and after and then click unhide, right? Here's where you could put a whole bunch of travel details, going to such and such conference. You could say how much your airfare was here. You can put notes. You want to say if it's international or not, because this is going to divide it. So on the federal forms, it asks you to cost those separately. So if you notice, if I change this to no, then it all goes to domestic, right? And if I change it to yes, then it divides. If I change this to yes, it's all in international. So that's just an easy way for you to fill out your Cayuse 424. Participant support costs, we don't have too often. These are exempt. These are like trainees, like if you had an REU program for NSF or you had particular trainees and things like that. Those costs go in here. So you wouldn't put your normal tuition and fees or your normal travel here. These are trainee travel. NRTs as well, and these are exempt from indirect costs. Then you have your materials and supplies. Again, you can tell that there's a lot of room here. It goes from 106 to 133. So you could have billion supply lines if you wanted, or you could just put lab supplies in a lump sum, however you wanted to do that. Publication costs are a separate line item in Cayuse, so there's a separate section for those. Consultant services. And then we get down to subaward costs. So you'll notice because we chose NIH, there's total subaward indirect costs. Normally, we don't need to separate our direct and indirect, but NIH says none of your subaward indirect count toward your direct cost total. So here's the thing. Normally, our subaward indirect costs are our direct costs, technically, right? All of their costs are our direct costs. But NIH doesn't want to penalize you for having a whole bunch of partners because they all have indirects, and then that eats away from our direct costs. So when they say 250 direct cost total, it doesn't include your subaward indirect costs. So as such, in this, we need to separate our direct from our indirect and have a line for each so that it can calculate those out and we can see the difference. So when we're using NIH, we want to have 2 lines for each subaward. So we have one for UC Irvine. And I'm going to do UC Irvine direct. And then I'm going to do UC Irvine indirect. And then I'm going to do Stanford direct. And Stanford indirect. So once you have that, the next thing you want to do is label whether something's UC or not. UC subawards are always excluded from our F&A rate, even if our F&A rate is total cost or total direct cost. We never charge on another UC sub because technically it's all the regents and it's not a true subaward in the same sense that others. So we never charge on the first 25K. Once we've decided that, on our second line where indirect is, on the one directly below, we want to choose IC of the above. That's indirect costs of the above. Because in the calculations, these 2 will total as 1 subaward, not 2 if we've done that. If you skip the line and did IC, it would treat it as a whole different subaward, right? Because it has to combine them for the first 25K if we had or it has to say both of these lines are excluded. Okay, so for the next one for Stanford, that's non-UC, we're going to charge on the first 25K if this is modified total direct cost, or the entire thing if it's total direct cost. And then on the second line, we're going to say IC of above. That's going to be their indirect costs. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to enter these in. It says UC Irvine is going to be 10,000 direct and 10,000 indirect in year 1. And Stanford's going to work on the project in year 2, and their costs are 20,000 in direct and 15 in indirect. Okay, did everybody get the same totals? Okay, and what you notice down here is that this totaled the total of the indirects. If you add multiple, you'll notice there's some lines here hidden. So you can add more subawards. We can unhide this and add a whole bunch more. Again, this is one of those sections. If you need like 18 subawards, you need to contact me. And it would add all of those together. So if I had IC above here, you'll notice then it's going to go up, right? Until the subtotal indirect costs. Okay. And then I want to show you if we went down here, see our indirect costs are 10,000 from our subaward. These are our normal total direct cost line, which is 117 so far. But you'll notice for the direct cost limit, it's only 107, right? So if we had a 250K NIH, this blue line is what we're trying to meet, even though these are actual direct costs. So that's an important distinction. Okay. Does anyone have questions about that? Yeah. So this automatically populates, and this is the amount that you're going to want to meet for your NIH direct cost limit, the blue amount. But you still want to know what our total direct costs are, which is going to be more, right? What it does is it's taking this total direct cost and it's subtracting the subaward indirect costs because they don't count toward the NIH limit. Did you pick NIH up at the top?
Mhm.
So that would be why. That's what.
Yeah, right by the dates. Because it distracts people if they don't have an NIH, if they have USDA, they don't want to see that line. So if you have non-NIH, none of that shows up. You have to pick NIH to do it. All right. So then we're going to think about our GSR fees. We have a non-resident. So you could put notes here if you had somebody's name. This is not required. Sometimes people use this to put like on PELP or TA ship as well, or whatever they want to put here to know something about their student. This is just reference. This confuses. If you pick non-residents, this does not change the rate. You have to change the rate by hand. This is just a reference field. And the reason for that is if this automatically updated the rate, you couldn't type anything in here. And people have all sorts of GSR situations. Some people have somebody that's partially on another grant. Some people have somebody who's a TA and is a non-resident, so they're paying the difference between the resident and the non plus this. There's all sorts of things. So I didn't want to make this automatically calculate. And you can either have a formula that automatically is based on something or something that's free form. So it's free form. So if you change this to non-resident, you actually have to type in. I update these when the new ones come out. Sometimes in the fall, they keep changing them and they'll go up and down $20 and they don't tell us. So they might be a little bit off. So you want to check these and then you can just type in whatever you want here. But for this case, the current non-resident rate is the 33,023. Normally, we allow an escalation at the university up to 10%. NIH doesn't usually notice the GSR fees are escalated, but they could. So you could choose 0 if you wanted to be safe. Otherwise, you might choose 5, 3%, 7%, whatever you think GSR fees are going to go up. People have different feelings about that. I always use 3 to 5% because I don't want my whole budget in escalations. That's really up to you. I've left it on 10%. You'll notice there's another little AY here, and this is like fiscal year. But it means that every October 1, these rates are going to escalate, starting with that submission due date. So we said our due date was January 1, 2019, but our project didn't start till 2020. So the first October 1, 2019, already one escalation. And then it's going to do a split rate. You'll see it 6 and 3. That's because we have 6 months, right, at one rate, and then 3 at the next rate, right? Because we have October through December as part of our first project period. If we go up and look at this, right? So you have January through June, and then you have a new rate from October through. So if you want to split your rates like that, because that's probably how your escalations are going to work, they escalate every fall, you would leave this on AY. If you decided, just like up there at the escalations, you wanted just a straight, you know, whatever our rates are now, and then every project period you wanted 10%, you would change this to PY. And I'm going to show you the difference. So let's say we have one GSR, and we're doing PY. The other thing is this is lower than 33 because we're using the buy down. So the provost pays 25% of all the fees, right, on your extramural funding. So if there's no reason why you wouldn't want to use the buy down because it saves your grant money. But let's say there's some reason you didn't want to. You could choose the full rate and you'll notice it's a straight calculation, right? It's just one GSR at the amount you've put in there. Now, if I change to AY, it's going to be higher because we already have those escalations built in.
So we'll get some kind of update.
I would think so. I anticipate it's been going on for so long that they're going to grandfather it in, right? They're going to say no new grants, but it would be very unpopular if they didn't grandfather it in. And that is a reason some people want to use full rates. They feel like, oh, it might disappear. It hasn't for at least 10 years. I don't anticipate that it would. Yeah. So anyway, you have a choice there. The other thing you can do is, so you have one GSR here. Sometimes you have a short period. Let's say you only had a 6-month project period and 3 of those were in the summer. This would only, and you put one GSR, it would only calculate 3 months because you only have 3 months available in the project. So this amount right here, how many academic months are available within your project period? Most of the time that's 9 because you have a 12-month period. But if you had a 3-month period and it was June through September, that would be 0 and you wouldn't have any grad fees, right? So the other thing you can do is right here, there's a drop down for quarters. if you only wanted 1/4, or 3/4, whatever you wanted. You could also accomplish this same thing by, you can put a formula in here and put 1/3, right? Same thing, 1/3, 1/4 out of 9. It's based on 9 months, so 2/3 would be 2/4. Yeah, but you can do quarters. Like if you just want 2/4, that's 2/4 worth.
And even if you have two GSRs, they would each do 2/4.
Just put 4 if you wanted. Yeah, if you have like 6 GSRs, you can just put a 6 here, and then you don't have to have more than 1 line. You know, if they were all NRT, or you can have some 2 lines. So yeah, you can do a lot of different things with that. Okay, for ours, we have now technically our grad student up here is only at 6.3%. There's a possibility we'd have no GSR fees, right? Because it's pretty low. But for the sake of our, we're going to have 1/4 worth. So we're going to change this to, and that's true. If this GSR was only working on this grant and was working 25%, we would pay them for 1/4. Let's say they were working on another grant and it was 25% on this grant for 1/4 and 25% on another, you could have 0.5 here, right? Because you're only paying half of 1/4. So you can do all things like that. So here we are, we've done academic year escalations, 10%. We're using the buy down, we're paying for 1/4. Did everybody get that? Okay. And then if you have a lot of lines here, it's going to total right here. So you know what your total GSR fees are right up here. All right. Now, if we're on an NIH grant and we're having a human subject study in more than one location. So in this case, UC Irvine is also going to be a study site. So we're going to be testing something out, cookies, right? People are going to be eating cookies here and at UC Irvine. But we don't want to have to go through 2 IRBs. So NIH has this new rule that says if you have 2 sites, you should only go through 1 IRB. So IRB has, they've also, when they made that rule, and I'm simplifying it, but allowed our IRBs to charge fees for that because they have to negotiate the contract and so forth. And these are subject to indirect costs. So the first thing is you can put your site name here. So we're going to put UC Irvine. And there's 2 things. In year 1, you're going to have to do an onboarding. So that's the initial negotiation of an agreement, or if you already have an agreement, the initial setting it up. And then you're going to have a continuing review, which has to be done every year. So you're always going to have 2 lines here if you have multi-site. And now there's something called, so our choices are onboarding agreement and no agreement. So an agreement means UC Irvine and us already have an agreement for a shared IRB, and we've decided to use it for this particular project. So that means in order to say that you have an agreement and you're going to use it, you really have to get the IRBs to talk to each other at time of proposal, which is sometimes not feasible. And in those cases, you may just want to say no agreement because that's the max they could charge you. And if something happens and you're not using that agreement, this is your best estimate. If you feel like it's pretty sure thing and you're going to use the existing agreement, then you could choose agreement and you'll notice that these rates go down, right? And we also have this non-UC and UC. So UC is cheaper because we all have the same terms and conditions. We're not arguing over those things. So we can say in our, okay, an agreement will be used in our scenario. So we're going to say we know for sure it is. And we have 1 site. So this is the number of sites. And then our second year, this is still a UC, right? It's UC Irvine. They're going to do a continuing review. It's going to be UC. It's $800 for continuing review. And we're going to go out to year 2 and put a 1. And year 2 and put a 1. And you'll notice these rates are based on the current rates. Now, once in a while, IRB will raise things like this and not tell us. So if you notice that, you can let me know and I'll update these. So that's how that works. And that's just in NIH specific. Now this section right here, does anyone have questions on IRB fees? No. Okay. Now our for-profit companies, we also charge IRB fees for, and those already include indirect costs within that rate. So you wouldn't put those here. This is just an NIH section. You would put those here and then put no to IDC. If you ever had an industrial sponsor, like a pharmaceutical company or something. Okay, so primate center costs, you'll notice there's some lines here. These are for recharge rates at the primate center. They usually give you a budget if you involve primates. Those have a whole different indirect cost rate. So you want to put those here if you had those. And then if you went to, watch, I'll show you, let's say if you had $10,000, you're going to do some work with the primates. If you go over here to F&A details, you'll see those were at 54.4%. And here's what you had at 57%. So when you're entering the forms, you have your 2 lines under your F&A rate. So that's the purpose of that section. We're not doing that in our scenario, but I just wanted to make you aware that's what that's there for. Okay, other expenses is our catch-all. It's everything else. It's like our fees, our charges, lease costs. Yeah. So in our description, we're leasing something. So we're putting lease costs in here, right? And lease costs are part of our F&A rate agreement are not subject to indirect. So I'm going to change this to no. So if you have costs here that aren't subject to indirect, you would put no. And then we have 100,000 total for all 3 years. That wasn't each year, right? Each year?
No, total.
Total.
So it's like
30, yeah. So if this were really something your PI told you, you'd be like, how do you want me to split that up? Is it even? Is it escalating? But we're going to assume. There we go.
we're gonna assume it's even with $1 more.
Yeah, it's going to go up $1 in year 3, right? Okay. Did everybody get that? And again, there's more lines hidden here if you need to add additional, if you need additional space. Now, since we have lease costs, that tells me we're leasing something off-site. So that would be a question that you want to ask your PI. Once in a while, you have lease costs and it's still on campus. You're just a very small part of the project has to be done off campus, like 10% of it. But most with $100,000, I'm assuming it'd be more substantial, and more than 50% of the project is off-site.
So that means, what would be the implication of that?
So if more than 50% of the project will take place off-site and we're charging lease costs, so it's not UC already, UC's not already paying those, like in this building here, then we want to go to off-campus research. That's a whole different rate because we're already paying for, we don't need indirect costs for campus here. We're charging them here. So off-campus, these are our federally negotiated rates are already built in here. We have off-campus and on-campus research. Then we have other sponsored activities on and off campus. Other sponsored activities could be you were just doing a service. Maybe you were running a mental health clinic. That could be one. Maybe you were just teaching a course. Like you were going to teach people sanitary methods for blood draw. That's some of the ones we get. That's another sponsored activity. You're not doing research. You're doing something else. Then what we also have is this other right here. So once you choose other things appear here. We have our different rates. Modified total direct costs. That's what we normally deal with. That's all of our rates are based on that. We exclude equipment, subawards after the first 25K, all those things, MTDC. TDC, some sponsors will come out and say you can have 10% TDC. That means on everything. So if you chose that 10%, you'll notice it's 10% of our base. And why is our base a little bit lower and it's not total direct cost? Does anybody know? Yep, because there's a sub to UC Irvine and that's always going to be excluded. So normally if we didn't have that UC Irvine, it would be 10% of this 161, right? Now total cost is something different. Total cost, you'll notice it would normally be this 177. It's total cost of everything, including the indirect. This again is a little bit lower because we're subtracting our other UC. They're already getting their 10%. So sometimes we have USDA grants that say you can have the lesser of 30% total cost or our on-campus, whatever our rates are, our federally negotiated rate. So what I like to do is choose other and then put TC 30. And I look at this. This is our total is 175. And then you can just toggle to campus research and 153. And you can see in this case, because we have subs, on campus research resulted in lower indirect costs. So that would be the appropriate rate. So you can just toggle back and forth between the two. The other thing you can do is go to custom. And there's a line hidden in here. And then you can create your own formula. Once in a while, you'll get a sponsor that says you can have 10% of personnel costs, right? I've seen that before. Then you can just put equals and go up here to personnel costs and click on that and hit return. Or you can type it in however you want. I like to put in a formula, then as your personnel changes, it automatically updates for you. And what this does is, then I can say 10% and it's going to charge it on that base. Now, if you are using this and you want to go back to our rates, you need to change it to something else. So it doesn't continue to calculate on that. And then you can hide this again and go back to using our usual rates. So sometimes people say they choose off campus and they say, well, I don't know what the rate is. And you're trying to figure out what that is because you didn't memorize what off campus research is. Well, you can just go to F&A details here and it'll tell you it's 26%. So that's, and this is important because what happens sometimes is not right now because we've been at the same rates for a really long time, but you know, our rates go up like 57, 57.5, 58, and you're gonna have split rates. And this will tell you how much each year at each. So some years you might have some at 57 and some at 58. So that's when this tab becomes more important. And again, okay, so here is our, I want to show you some of the features of our personal reference. First, let me go back and say, did everybody get this amount right here on their budget? Let's go back to that. Yeah. Okay. So if I were entering this, I'd also want to go over here. You want to go back?
So under other expenses excluded, you have like what your numbers are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so see something happened here with the formula. Okay, 67, so that's why yours is probably off.
Her formulas went out?
Yeah, one of the formulas here. I got something different too.
All right, let's look.
So look, this is just
What happened?
Both up 495.
Okay, let's see. Go up. 31. You have 241 for your personnel costs up at the top? No. Oh, because you left it on no escalations to fringe.
Oh.
And in our scenario, we were escalating. Does she have no escalations to fringe? Yeah, you have no. You want to change it right here.
Yep.
We were playing around with that. Yeah, there you go. Now you have it? Oh, sure.
Yeah, I just.
somehow the.
Maybe when you were it looks like maybe you dragged it a little bit too far.
No. This is off 187,861. Yours is 188,661 up there. So.
Oh, it could be on one of yours up here, you did the round, right?
Yes,
No.
but still that's an
IRB,
awful
it's
large
because right here, put one there for, you want year 3, you want to put a 1
Oh,
for continuing review, for one thing. Yeah.
188, yeah.
okay.
No, but it's
It's
5,
still
8, 3.
high.
I know.
Do you
keep
have,
going.
you have on campus, so switch this to off campus down here,
Yeah.
go back down. No, you're to the indirect cost. And select the rate type, select off campus.
Mhm.
There it is.
It's
Oh,
close.
no, yeah,
It's
Close.
yeah. It's because I didn't do the round.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense now. Well, it's like 600.
Yeah,
though.
it shouldn't.
It shouldn't do
It
that.
rounds itself. Here, can you go back up? Let's
Go-
look.
Maybe look at the subawards.
Yeah, let's look. Okay, that looks right. Keep going. I'm thinking personnel.
Yeah.
See what we're doing there.
Oh, 178,901. So that's different, but it's lower. 1, 2.
So
10. So the postdoc is slightly off, but that's not.
maybe she just typed in 25 instead of doing the formula because it might be like 24 point something. No, nope, that isn't. Yeah, that's what I have too.
Yeah, and that's I can see that the postdoc is different at the summary, like at the very.
So which is the one you did the formula?
I
where
know,
you
because this
entered
is
round?
900 and we have 990.
Oh.
39,990 is what we have for the postdoc.
Oh.
It shouldn't.
But
be
that
that much.
still isn't.
So let's just see. Okay.
178,925.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so now go down to your fringe. 241, 55. Yep. Okay, so go all the way down. Yep, now you're right. You're off by one, but that's okay.
How about you? Do you have your opinion? All right. See, this is why I say it's good to come to these classes in person, right? Because these are the kind of issues you'll actually experience since you're at your desk doing it.
All right.
It's easier for us to troubleshoot with you, and I think we all learn.
Okay, so then over here, I want to show you a couple features. Again, there's lines missing here because if you had more, if you unhid more personnel, you'd want to unhide lines here. You can decide who's senior personnel. I like to do this when I ask my PI who's really senior personnel, because sometimes there's a question, like, is this project scientist senior, or is this person senior, or are they other personnel? You can mark that here so you know. The other thing you can do is, let's pretend these were both postdocs. On the grants.gov forms, on the Cayuse 424 forms, they ask you how many postdocs and then a lump sum, right? How much salary and how much fringe. So if you choose these both as postdoc, this adds that together for you so that you know how much all your postdocs are. It tells you how much the combined person months for those are and what the total salary and benefits you are for postdocs. So if I put this person as a postdoc, you'll notice all of that goes up, right? So, and that's true of GSRs as well, and undergrads, and then clerical, because those are the other personnel where you have to lump them together. The other thing I sometimes do, let's say you were writing in your own other personnel, like other professional or something, and you said these two people are other professional. Well, I don't have that down here because you could have two like community specialists, right? And you want to add them together. Just for a second, change them both to postdoc and then use that amount, right? Then you know how much, so you can add people together. Besides doing that right here, again, we talked about this is an academic year person. So you're gonna wanna know with the escalations, if you're using fiscal year, this is an easy way to know how much am I really charging for their academic year salary and how much their summer. This is what you would enter on your Cayuse forms. And these are the person months you would enter. Over here, this is salary plus fringe per person. Sometimes that's important to know. You want to know what's their total compensation, especially when we're doing like DOE and things. Sometimes they ask that, how much are you charging per person? This adds that up for you. This tells you summer salary, since we're using A, B, and C, just how much based on the project period are you charging at each rate? You'll notice, like I said, this one, since we had 2 weeks from 6:15 to 7:1, we chose A. So you notice 0.5 months, we're at 10.2, and 0.5, we're at 10.5. That just tells you how your fringe are calculating for summer faculty. And again, these are the sum of these right here. All right. So that just helps you with knowing things about your personnel. Does anyone have questions about this form? And I'll show you some of our other options for templates, or does anybody want to go over? Mm-hmm.
Are they posted to what you just have there? I can hear in the summer, both 9 to 12.
Oh, sometimes you have 11 over 12, right? Faculty?
There are ones where they don't.
They get 1 month of summer salary. So a lot of our CAES faculty are 11/12. Like when they are specialists in the AES, they have that appointment. So then you would do their base salary is really 11 months, and this, instead of being 3, is 1 month. You just divide it by 11. You would divide this by 11 to get this amount. Because they can have up to 1 summer month. These are pretty much the only appointments we have. We have 9/12, 11/12, and then 12/12.
Yeah, I guess just looking at those and how I'm figuring it out over here,
Mhm.
I feel like I have to do it manually.
Over where?
The base in the summer versus that
This,
tab down there. I feel like I'm just doing trial and error
okay.
kind of.
Okay, how can I help? Because I don't think it would be trial and error, right? This would, if this is a 9-month salary, you're gonna divide that by 9, and you're gonna times it by 3. If this were 11, we would just divide it by 11. We wouldn't times it by anything because that's 1 month, right?
So the point of
Divided. I didn't
Let me
divide
try
it.
to
Divide it by
sometimes.
11. Okay.
Okay, so the point of annualized salary, right, is the amount someone could earn over a 12-month period. If they have a 12-month appointment,
Right.
it is already annualized. So if you have someone with a 12-month appointment, their base equals their annualized salary. So that is always the same
Because they can't earn more than that.
because they cannot earn more than that. But if you have someone with a 9-month appointment, right, to annualize their salary, you have to see how much would they earn if they got paid
12 months.
12 months, right? So their 9 months is their academic appointment, right? And so that would be their base salary times 9/12 because they work 9 months. They work 9 academic months.
No, it's just their base salary.
It's just their base. Oh, yes, sorry. If they get a 9-month, well, I'm trying to think what their annualized salary is.
Okay, so then you would take their base salary, divide it by 9.
Yes, divide by.
Yeah.
Divide by 9 times by 12.
Right.
Yep.
Because then you get 12
That's
ninths of salary.
Right. So then this is their,
Annualized
that's their annual.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's the same, it's just what it's gonna be monthly versus 9 over. Instead of 12 months, it'd be 9 months. So basically, the annualization is still the same.
You mean for an 11-month faculty member?
Here, let me break this down. Let me try to do this the way that I think about it because it's we
Okay.
all think about things so different, right?
We do. Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard when we're doing.
So let's look at somebody who makes 100,000 as their base salary. 3 different examples.
Okay, so the base is 100,000, right?
Mhm.
So if they have a 12-month appointment, their annualized equals that 100,000.
That's the most they can make in 12 months.
Right. Now, if they have an 11-month,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So then their annualized would be,
Divide by 11.
divide by 11. So take
'Cause that gives you
100,000.
1 month, and then we're going to times it by 12.
Right. Divide by 11. And then that equals
1
month
Right.
of salary. And so then you take that, multiply it by 12.
And it equals 109,090. In
Does that
90.
make sense?
No, in 90. 090.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
including 1 month of summer
and then
salary.
if you made 9/12, right?
Yeah.
You know
So-
that one. It's 133.3.
Okay, so I'll just write it out and then so that would be 100,000 because
Mhm.
that's the base salary divided by 9 because that's their number of academic months times 12 and that equals 1, 3, 3, all threes, right?
Yeah.
I wrote over it. Yeah, so that's so this is how much they could make if they got paid that monthly salary for all 12 months. That make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it depends on the base. It depends on their base,
Mhm.
what their, how you're going to annualize their salary.
So if they're paid 9/12, this is 3 months of this, right? Divide by 9 times 3. If they're paid 11/12, divide by 11, right? To get 1 month. If they're paid 12, you put nothing here. Does that make more sense now? Or?
So when you're, I mean, everything is the same in the two top lines. It's just that how, when you put period 1 and
Here?
each of those, it's just a matter of which one you're thinking of, if it's summer or academic.
Right. Same effort, because you're talking about annual effort no matter what.
So can you just click down on the salary base? So I can see-
Here?
No.
Here?
The salary base and height.
Here? Yeah, this is just a reference for you. It's not going to change any of the calculations besides the person on the calculation. So it's how are you charging salary? Are you going to charge academic year salary? Is your professor charging summer salary? Is this a 12/12 appointment? Or would you
So
like?
that's just kind of FYI information.
But it changes your person months, because if I change this to 11/12, it changes versus 12/12. If I change this top person to 12/12, then we're just looking at this number. See, it's going to say that's your total, right? Which is a higher amount. It's the total of both of them together. Does that make sense? Yeah. Do you want to do another example or? Okay. All right. All right. Feel free. There's also more information in this budget FAQ about that as well.
Oh,
And our budget cards have it
Yeah.
too. We try to address it every which way we can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to show you some of our other options here as well. We have this cost sharing budget, and what you can do here is, let's say you have mandatory cost sharing and you want to develop a budget that shows both, right? You can put some of these as cost sharing. And you'll notice it splits, right? How much are we requesting? How much are we cost sharing? Then when you pick your rates, again, some of this is cost shared and some not. And you can do that all the way throughout this entire sheet. And then if you get down here, it tells you what your requested budget is, what your cost shared, and what your total budget is. And then if you had to do match half of all the project costs, right, it tells you what your percentage you're at. If you were doing unrecovered indirect costs, you can choose. And then unrecovered on the request, like let's say they were only giving us 10%, but they let us cost share the difference between 57 and 10, you can choose that here, yes or no. So it'll calculate that for you. So you have a lot of options there. But again, it behaves pretty much exactly like the other sheet besides dividing up these cost sharing.
okay, so this actually includes a budget and cost sharing.
It's your entire budget. Because when we think about cost sharing, everything that we cost share needs to be a project cost. So really when you do a cost sharing budget, a lot of our PIs will just say, here's my budget, and then here's 100,000 in cost sharing. Well, for it to be cost sharing, you have to be spending it on something that on the project, right? And so you should have a budget that costs out everything. Yeah. Okay, so there's that option. Then there's the multi-budget. This was originally intended for NIH grants that were multi-component. You can have each of your components. You can rename these tabs and have one on each. And there's a summary page that'll summarize each component and then add in all your costs. Some people use them for tasks. And then sometimes this has to be redone because maybe you have tasks on each page that have varying project periods and you don't want it all to total in one just because it's in the first column. So sometimes you have to actually alter these, and it's okay to change the formulas on here if you were doing something special or ask me how to do that. But if you're just using NIH, it'll work perfectly for you. You have a different component and your project periods would be exactly the same. So these operate independently, and then there's a summary. You can create your own summary by just adding in a sheet and creating your own summary as well. Sometimes when you do maybe a DOE or a cost, you have to have different summaries or things like that. You can add them right in here and then print them. So that's how that one works. AB 20, again, works just like our other sheet, except down here at the bottom, whatever based on your start date. It's going to calculate your indirects, whatever our state rate is based on the start date. And then here's all our internal forms. And if you go over here, it creates this for you. So you could just print it and you don't have to do a whole separate form. All of that carries over and you'll see the rate right here. So that's designed for our AB 20 for our state contracts. CIRM is a good example of a specialized sheet because they have such a different way that they calculate indirect costs, and that's all down here. They have some things at rate A and then rate B, and then there's a indirect on top of those rates. So it does that for you. Like if I put 100,000 in here, it automatically does that, so you don't have to think about that. If you're applying to CIRM, it's regenerative medicine. It's usually the med center. And then, again, let me show you our FAQs. So there's a bunch of topics here. So let's say, what does the NIH, non-NIH drop-down choice do in cell D1? If you forgot about that, you click here. It shows you how to change it and then all the differences, right? So you can go right to that topic. If we scroll down here, it talks about how to unhide lines, how the salary basis columns work that we just talked about. How do I calculate 1 month of salary? That's that whole effort that we talked about. That's right in there. Here's some formulas for your GSR. Like this GSR is going to work 47% during the academic year and 100% during the summer. This shows you how to do that. 0.47 times 9 plus 3 divided by 12, right? That's that formula we talked about. How things escalate. I have not updated the benefits to the new UC path in here, but they basically work the same, just, you know, different. This talks about AY and PY escalation. So there's all sorts of topics here. And again, you can get to them here. If you have things you want to see added to this, just let me know. If you have questions and you think it would be good to put them in here. But again, you can just calculate here. Like what if I only want to calculate 2 quarters? Teach you how to do that. So, all right. Does anyone have any questions? This one?
So the R1, 2, 3.
These are like different budgets. So NIH, when you do a multi-component, you have like an administrative core, and then you might have an animal core, and then you might have 3 research projects, and they all have to have separate budgets and be submitted to NIH. So you would do each budget on a different one, and then it would summarize your totals.
Okay, so this would be like for there was another department.
Not usually. I think it's you could use it that way. It's cumbersome. I think what I usually do when you have 2 departments is just put like postdoc and then put in parentheses somebody's initials, and then I make it all one budget because I find that easier. Like if Joe has a postdoc, you might put JR, and then if you know, Felicia has one, FP, then you know which postdocs belong to whom. But if you wanted to have 2, you certainly could, but just when you entered something normally in Cayuse, you would have to combine those. So that's really up to you. You could use it for that purpose.
Okay, so R1 is going to go with, what's the F1?
These are like the fringe, you know, the F&A that we talked about.
Oh, okay.
They're just associated F1 with R1. Sometimes when I'm doing large budgets, I just hide all of these until I need them. Like if I had primate costs interdispersed, I might only need it for F3 because that's the only R3 had primate costs. I would already know what the rates were.
I'm just trying to see.
And you can rename these. So if if you right click them, you can rename them. You could say like task 3.8. You can do that.
So they're not tied to fiscal year though, right?
No, you can change whatever you want here. They each operate independently.
And then F are the benefits.
No, F is your F&A. Yeah, your F&A, and then I know you can't see it on this, but there's also the, yeah, there's P's. There's that personnel reference. They say P. It's just under here. I think if we go to small, you can see them right here. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And they're like, if you rename this task 3.4, you'd probably want to rename this one and this one just so you knew what they were, right? So they're corresponding, but you'd have to have slight different. You'd have to say like task 3.4F task, because they all have to have different titles. And then you would change it here. You would type in what task 3.4 here, let's say, for example. So you knew what it was totaling. Yeah. Yep. Anything else? You want to talk about resources then? Okay.
Participant support costs.
Uh-huh.
Those are only deducted, or is it anytime training grant or?
It's MTDC. So anytime you're using like an MTDC. Mhm. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the rate is, or training grant.
Well, the rate, explain how the rates work.
Okay, so it will vary. If you had a foundation, you wouldn't use this. This is mostly for federal. Okay, so if we're using our federally negotiated rates, any of them on campus, off campus, other sponsored activities, instruction, any kind of federal rate, then these would be subtracted from our base. If we had some other odd rate, like total direct cost, total costs, or something that's just not federal, we would never use this section.
The only reason I'm asking is I have one right now,
Mhm.
and it was from another department had it taken over, and somebody had mentioned that it's federal,
Mhm.
it's 8% of the training grant, and
If it's already 8%, it's usually, this isn't applicable.
that's what
So it
I'm thinking.
varies.
And I looked through the award
Mhm.
I had, and I found some other budget that was deducting, and I'm guessing it's at the proposal stage.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of getting.
I mean, it's possible that it's 8%. We would have to look at all sorts of things with the grant. So I couldn't tell you right here.
Well, no, I know
But-
it's 8%, it's just the participants costs that are questioned because they're
Right.
not, charging on those, but in the GAM, it does charge it.
Right. If it's 8% MTDC, it's possible that these would be excluded, but we'd have to look at, I couldn't tell you right now, but yeah, but yes, it's possible that you would still exclude them even though it was 8% if it was MTDC. So in our next, but possible not, we'd have to look at some things. But in our next indirect rate agreement, this is actually going to be one of the things that's excluded. So it's going to say lease costs, tuition and fees, and participant support costs. So that would mean whenever used in MTDC. The reason I can't tell you what the 8% is, it would vary by that sponsor, that particular program, whether they even wanted you to use this category. Yeah.
It's all based on sponsors.
Exactly. And that-
CGA
and that-
set it up, they didn't set it up with asking two accounts. So they.
Yeah, it'd have to be a whole separate,
Account that would not have.
right.
Well, not to say that it wasn't done.
No, true.
But that would be, if it's already awarded, that's a conversation to have with CNG accounting. Yeah. We can't change what they're doing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They've made a decision and whatever that's based on, you would have to have that conversation with them. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, so now I'll just go over the resources with everyone.
Okay.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
good. And I hope everyone learned a lot today. You do have evaluation sheets. It'll be great if you could complete them. They're with your handouts. It'll just help us to see if we should revise or what, right? We're trying to, and also like to make sure that the topics we're offering are still of use. So that's another thing that's really helpful for us with those little evaluation sheets. And everyone should have one. It's like the last page, the last handout you should have. So these are some of the resources and the links. The first one is the OR budget templates, which we all use today. So I think we know what those are. There's also a toolkit, preparing a proposal budget toolkit on our website. And that's the direct link to that, but you can always find it from our website as well. And we also have a preparing and submitting, it's proposal preparation is the name of the page. And it just goes into all of the various things that you might need to do when you're preparing your proposal. And of course, there are other resources as well, but these are the main ones. So Odie's here with us today, and he just was wondering if you had any more questions. I feel like maybe we've asked them, but if you have any more questions, we are definitely here to answer those. But I'm going to go ahead and end the actual Zoom meeting so that we can just kind of put the microphones down. is the goal there. So Carmen, we're getting off of line now, but thank you for joining us, and we will be in our offices later if you have questions. Thanks.